Warning. The following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to another edition of Hot Takes with the Biz. Today, I'm with the only other man that I will share my name with because he deserves it. It's Producer Bill from the Nerd G.O.A.T podcast.
Hello. Thank you for being so magnanimous as to share your name.
We're a special breed.
That's it. Listen, I've never met a Bill I didn't like. I think I can say.
Cosby. So Bill's joining us from the Nerd G.O.A.T podcast, and if you don't know by now, where have you been? We are teaming up, Hot Takes with Billy Biz. You guys at Nerd G.O.A.T this weekend.
Very excited about it. This is the first time that Nerd G.O.A.T is going to go live on a Comic-Con panel, and we couldn't be more excited to be doing it with you. And the fact that it's not just a panel, but we're launching a brand new podcast venture as collaborators. We are so stoked for that.
Yeah, this is like our Avengers.
Yes,
we're coming together. We've had some solo movies, and now it's the big one.
Totally. I hope it's worthy of being called the Avengers and not the Defenders. So
let's not be the Defenders. Let's be the real ones.
Exactly.
So we are going to be doing a show live at Comic-Con this Sunday. What month are we in now?
October.
Wow. Sunday, October 13th, LA Comic-Con. Reboot it. Now, a lot of times we hear there's another reboot and we just sigh, we roll our eyes. But what if you had no choice?
And let me tell you, having worked in TV development for a long time, a lot of times you don't have a choice. People just come in, who knows where they come from, who knows why they get these ideas, but they just sit down and throw something on your desk and they're like, today we're doing this.
Yeah, so we are going to be, the whole limited series that we're doing is rebooting things that maybe we don't even want to reboot, but it's our jobs, it's our duty to reboot these properties the way that we see fit. And if you've ever listened to the Nerd G.O.A.T podcast, which I know you have, because I've been on there and I've sent you guys over there, and it's a good show. You know that those guys and Mr. Bill here, as you're going to see, Producer Bill has opinions. So at LA Comic-Con, we will be doing Batman.
One
of the hardest franchises to crack. There's you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah, it's so weird. I've been doing a little sort of preliminary thinking on this already. And when you look back at it, it's been done so many times and there is no consensus except maybe for one movie, although not if you ask Ed Greer, that they've ever gotten it completely right.
Well, we're going to try. We're going to do our best.
We are going to crack that code.
We're going to do it live. It's Theater of the Improv. That show will happen live this Sunday. Why do I keep wanting to say April? October.
We're just that busy. There's that much going on.
It's also April, like weather outside.
Oh, no, totally. Why is it raining in Los Angeles? Nobody knows.
No. But yeah, October 13th, this Sunday. Please come out and see us live. We want to see you there. And now, for our main event today.
Oh, yes.
We are talking about one that I was hesitant to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this movie because I felt really alone on this one.
Oh.
And then I found out that when I pitched this one to you that we could do kind of a twofer. Today we were talking about 2018's Deadpool 2. But the reason why this is kind of a special episode, and I've never done this before, whenever we do this show, it's my hot take. It's my opinion that is usually far from the norm, and then the guest talks either they're on my side or they're trying to be the voice of the people. You have an unpopular opinion on Deadpool in general, so it's like double episode.
Yes, I've out hot taked you. That was my takeaway from our exchange. I have a hotter take than you do this time.
Okay, so let's start with Deadpool 1. Let's go all the way back to the beginning of this thing.
Well, if you want to go even further back, I'll come out hot. I've always had a problem with Deadpool. I don't get it. I don't really get the character. I don't get the approach. And I'll just caveat it up front. I was an Image kid in the 90s. I'm very much a 90s kid. I don't have a problem with the Image guys necessarily. We can talk about Rob Liefeld because there are some problems there, but I don't have a problem with, excessive 90s characters. I don't have a problem with satire. I love Squirrel Girl, for example. And I don't have a problem with overly violent or even goofy stuff. The Deadpool character has never quite clicked for me. And I'll start Deadpool 1. Here's my problem.
Okay, let's get into it.
I'm gonna actually start with Logan, and I'm gonna take a 1 minute detour to talk about Logan.
Please.
Because I think in my mind they're related. So Logan was hailed as this watershed moment in superhero movies, and everybody was comparing it to Unforgiven. And to me, that never really worked, because Unforgiven was an indictment of the narrative that the Westerns sold us, right? So Unforgiven took all the Western tropes and just undercut the myth of the cowboy. So Logan did not do that for superheroes. You know what does that for superheroes is something like The Boys, right? Logan was basically just an old man who's tired of the game gets roped back into it because he's convinced that no matter how beat up he is, his ideals are still worth fighting for, which is a perfectly fine narrative, but that's also been Logan's exact story in every movie we saw him in. So to me, Logan was this sort of reheated retread that was just darker and more violent. How that connects to Deadpool is I sort of feel like people had the same idea about Deadpool. They felt like this is this watershed moment because it does this thing, this really clever thing that nobody has ever done before, which is make a superhero satire. But to that I say, how was it satirizing superheroes? I don't get it. Again, The Boys is a superhero satire because that takes the tropes and the iconography and the morality of the genre and indicts it. Deadpool was really just a pretty standard revenge thriller with a bunch of comedy layered on top of it. And look, I'm not going to say it's not an enjoyable movie because I can appreciate an ultra-violent comedy with the rest of them.
Sure.
But to hold it up as this sort of like this breakthrough moment, this watershed, this, oh my God, this has never been done before. And I grant it hadn't been done like that.
But it had been done.
Yes.
Timing was everything for Deadpool.
Totally.
And I think that's where, and I walked away, I really did love Deadpool.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. I think, there are scenes in some of these Deadpool movies, and some from 1, some from 2, that directly pull from other movies that have taken the piss out of superheroes. Like, I'm literally thinking like, oh, signing up at a superhero table, that's Mystery Men.
Right.
But the problem with something like Mystery Men, and the reason why I don't think that hit, was because it was deconstructionalism in a time where we hadn't yet built up the superheroes to a point where it was time to deconstruct them again.
Okay, but let me stop you there, because my question then becomes, how does Deadpool deconstruct superheroes?
I think it's definitely, it's by calling out the tropes without falling into them.
But I don't think it does. I don't think it cleverly calls out tropes. I mean, yes, he makes a crack about the superhero landing.
Sure.
Does it go deeper than that, though? That's the thing that I never saw.
I think it's just the fact that, like, maybe it's not so much deconstruction in the sense of like really unraveling it, but it's like to that point, you have to think it would only be a couple months later before we would get not Man of Steel, Batman v Superman,
right,
and Suicide Squad. Like, we were heading into a territory, especially after like Man of Steel and the Dark Knight trilogy, where superhero movies now were so serious. Like, it had gone all like a full 180 from going like campy with Joel Schumacher's films into almost veering too far the other way. So at that point in early 2016, we hadn't had someone take the piss out of superhero movies intentionally.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I say timing was on the side of Deadpool. I think if you put Deadpool out in 2002, 2003, it does not have the same effect that it does in 2016.
I can buy that. I guess maybe I'm discovering as I'm listening to you talk, maybe I just am not down with deconstruction in superhero cinema at all, which is not to say that I'm not down with deconstruction, because I do like it in comics, but I sort of feel like anytime they try to deconstruct, whether it's Deadpool or whether it's Batman v Superman, they're almost trying to pick apart. And again, I don't think this applies to Deadpool, but certainly like the Zack Snyder movies are trying to like pick apart and pull the rug out from under things that aren't universally agreed upon. You know what I mean? It's like Zack Snyder is trying to be like, oh, you think Superman is this thing, but whoop, no, he's not. He's this thing. And I sort of feel like, well, we don't have the overriding cultural consensus on Superman that's strong enough for that to hit.
But I also think it's not, I think the reason why Deadpool 1 worked was not just because it was deconstructing the superhero movie genre as a genre, but also like finally acknowledging the huge missteps of the actual history of these movies.
That I can get behind you. Specifically, I think what it does with the X-Men and the way that it totally lampshades some of the more inept handling of X-Men, which really carries through into Deadpool 2, but I think in a more sort of garish, gauche way. In the first one, it's clever. I don't particularly care for it in Deadpool 2. So that I can get behind. I can get with you on. I guess for me, it's not even that the first Deadpool is a bad movie. Like I said, I laughed. I enjoyed it. Actually, I think my biggest laugh in that movie was the opening credits. Like, to me, that was legitimately really over the top clever. It's just, I walked away feeling like I had just eaten a bunch of cotton candy. I guess, and maybe I'm just a movie snob, but to me, that's the first indication that a movie isn't everything it's cracked up to be. When you walk out and you're like, yeah, that happened.
Sure. Look, I'm not going to put this thing up on a pedestal and say it was a masterpiece, but
Fair.
I do think, like, for what it was trying to do, an R-rated comic book movie at that point was like, are you sure that's a good idea, guys? And it broke every record.
Yeah.
It smashed them wide open. A superhero comedy that was raunchy. It was R-rated. Sure, narratively, it doesn't do anything special.
Yeah.
You're right. But the chemistry that Morena Baccarin and Ryan Reynolds had, like, I bought into it. The villain is dumb, but they know it's dumb. And they, like, they're well aware.
Right.
This might be the most cynical moment I've had that I can recall.
Okay.
But I walked out of Deadpool. We saw it on the Thursday opening night. I walked out and I said, wow, that was really funny, really great, really unexpected. I loved that. That sequel is going to be awful. That's the first thing that I said.
Oh, that's
so
prescient.
Yes.
Prescient.
And here's why Deadpool 2 gets under my skin and why it does not connect with me. I think one thing that Deadpool has that Deadpool 2 doesn't is this kind of scrappy sense of urgency.
Yes.
It knows that it's not supposed to exist, but it does, and it's pissed off that no one wants it to be there.
I can 100% get behind that. And yeah, to me, that is the most glaring, and I'll use the word again, garish difference between the two, is that the first one had the advantage of sucker punching the audience, right?
Right.
This is something that nobody expected, nobody was necessarily asking for, nobody thought could work, and here it comes just shooting for the stars. By the time you get to 2, it unfortunately did the thing that felt inevitable, which was, well, let's just do the same thing with more money.
Yeah, it's kind of, like I tend to not do comedies on this podcast because comedy's so subjective that
Fair.
it's hard to know whether or not, something's actually funny or if it's just funny to you. The problem with Deadpool 2 is, and I have the same criticism of Austin Powers, of Goldmember, where in Goldmember they do the joke and it's like, in the second Austin Powers movie, it looks like a big penis in the starship, and they do like Johnson or Wieners, get your wieners. They do it again in Austin Powers and Goldmember, and it's supposed to look like boobs. But then it gets to a part where Ozzy Osbourne's like, boobs. The filmmakers are boobs. They did the same joke as the last time. And we're supposed to laugh like, okay, they know. It's like,
Right.
wait. That doesn't give you a free pass just because you're calling out your own laziness.
Yes.
And I feel like Deadpool 2 does that a lot, where they're just like, oh, they couldn't think of anything better. It's like, yeah, you couldn't? Really?
Yeah, well, they hang that whole movie in a way that the first one wasn't on breaking the fourth wall. I mean,
Right.
They cannot let 3 scenes go by before they do a big, obvious fourth wall break. And half the time, to your point, they're commenting on what you just saw happen in a way that just undercuts the fact. Here's the other weird thing about this movie. They're actually telling like a really dark, kind of brutal story. And they can't seem to decide whether they want you to feel that or whether they want to make fun of it the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, this movie cannot pick a lane and stay in it.
It's bizarre to me. And like the Marvel movies get this criticism sometimes where people say like they use humor to undercut the emotional stakes. I've never felt that. And like, I think because in the Marvel movies, they just achieve some sort of an equilibrium. They let the dramatic moments hit. They let the characters actually react to the dramatic things that are happening. And then the humor is there almost as a solve, almost as like, yeah, there is some dark happening, but we're not going to let it get hopeless.
Sure.
This movie does this weird thing where it's nihilistic in both the drama and the comedy. You know what I mean? Like it just posits like the most depressing world and set of characters, and then uses the comedy to just drive home how awful everything is.
Yeah, it's very bizarre to me because they start off in such a dark manner by killing Morena Baccarin, which why would you waste the best part of that first movie is their relationship.
100%.
You've taken that piece off the board when we start. It's like, okay. And then it's like we're supposed to believe that Wade just, he's so depressed and he doesn't want to live anymore. But that trope or that story, the what do they call it in comics as the girl in the fridge?
Fridged her.
Yeah, that doesn't work for Deadpool because the whole conceit of Deadpool is that he's breaking the fourth wall and farting and laughing the whole time. And
right.
It's like, well, you can't have both. Like it would almost be a better movie if everyone around him was hilarious this time, trying to get him to be Deadpool again, because he just can't be Deadpool if she's gone.
Yeah.
I know that doesn't make for the most exciting marketing, but
to your point, I mean, that would have been picking a lane, right? That would have been just embracing this is a comedy. And again, we know the tropes, but that is a great comedy setup of like this one guy, the one guy is so down, so torn up that like he can't live up to the comedy going on around him, I suppose.
Right.
I get that. I get that setup.
But then, and that setup gives you, I think if you go that way, you get into the 22 Jump Street section where they do call out that they have nothing better to do. And it works that way. If he's like, guys, I can't be funny, because it works as like a double entendre. Like my emotional state doesn't let me be funny, but also like we're doing the same jokes again, Right. So like again, like I think that all just falls into picking a lane. And on that note, like, what's his face? Josh Brolin, Cable, just feels like he's in a completely different movie than everybody else.
Oh, could not agree more. And I feel like the movie thought that would be hilarious, and it isn't. I mean, I would argue that the Cable moments drag that movie down. And which is not to say that Josh Brolin isn't playing a good Cable. I mean, there's something sort of so over the top, surly and gritty that it very much feels like a 90s pastiche. It's just they don't actually invest any sort of likable banter between him and Deadpool, which to me was the whole promise of the thing going in, was that there would be, Deadpool's madcap antics versus Cable's dour refusal to engage in comedy. But then to your point, they start Deadpool as someone too dour and depressed to engage in comedy.
Yeah,
it's weird.
The thing is, and you were talking about a criticism of Deadpool 1 was you're like, this feels like ground I've tread in so many movies. It doesn't feel like it's breaking ground, but I feel like that's actually what makes Deadpool. It's like,
yes,
they went the opposite way with this one, because in the first one there's not a lot of plot, but there's a lot of story. This one there's so much plot that it gets so bogged down, and I'm just like, why is this guy here? Why is Zazie Beetz? I love Zazie Beetz, but
totally.
It's like, I think she even's kind of like, yeah, I kind of just do things. And you're like, then why are you here?
Right. And what was also weird to me is talking about the amount of story in the movie or the amount of plot. Why was this movie sort of a weird remake of X3? I mean, did you catch that at all?
With like
just the fact that there's like the one special mutant that everybody's trying to get their hands on. There was weird,
Juggernaut.
Yeah, there was the Juggernaut appearance. There was the weird train escape sequence that was in both movies. I guess in this one, technically, it's like a caravan of trucks, but it all just felt weirdly similar. And then both movies were promising sort of a post-apocalyptic future that everybody was trying to avoid. Again, I couldn't tell if that was intentional because they didn't lean hard enough into making it satire, but then it was different enough that you felt like, am I just supposed to take this seriously as its own story? And I couldn't do either. I couldn't laugh at it or take it seriously.
It's funny. I never thought about the connections between that and Last Stand. And it makes you think like X-Men The Last Stand is like that girlfriend that burned you so hard. And as much as you try to move on, you keep dating girls that are just like her.
And Simon Kinberg could not move on.
He can't move on.
He tried to make it work again.
And I'm one of the weirdos that likes X-Men The Last Stand. But just seeing them, like they just keep trying to like redo these beats.
I'm kind of maybe I'm a Philistine, but I'm kind of sick of mutants in movies. I feel like the entire X-Men franchise peaked at X2, and yes, I am including X-Men First Class, so I'm full of hot takes for your podcast.
Thank you.
But I feel like the whole X-Men franchise peaked at X2, and since then, almost every X-Men movie has either been Wolverine trying to get over the fact that he's too old for this or them trying to avoid some sort of post-apocalyptic future. Like, those are the only two stories they got.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I've said I'm not the biggest fan of the X-Men movies. I've made that abundantly clear. And I think that's why Deadpool felt like a breath of fresh air, was that there were X-Men like very faint ties to it. But then like again in this one, I feel like Deadpool 2, and this is why I'm surprised that so many people like have a positive reaction. I feel like it pleases nobody. If you go to these things because you're kind of sick of all the comic book tie-ins and like X-Men, like the comedy's the same. But if you go because you want to see like the X-Men stuff, it's like, well, what a letdown to have this whole sequence built up around this X-Force.
Yeah.
And then it's just like a joke that it's like, well, then why did you waste so much screen time on this joke?
That's what I'm saying. Like, the humor is almost mean-spirited toward the audience. It's sort of like, and this goes back to what I was saying about how they use humor to undercut their own drama. It's so often the humor in this movie feels like, oh, were you getting into that? You idiot. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Were you having an emotional reaction? What a jerk. You know, I mean, it's just weird. It's like, it's a movie that almost has contempt for the people watching it, which is never a good sign.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that is because, like before the first one was kind of ignored by the studios and now the studio is all over it. How much of that is because a new director hops into this one?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I'm truly don't know, because this doesn't feel simpatico with the first one. Like if you watch them back to back, like they're it doesn't feel like you said. Yeah, the first one seems like pissed off at the studio and it's like, we're for the people, and then the second one seems like, yeah, pissed off at me, like you're an idiot for coming to this.
It's like the first one was when you were punk, and the second one is like when you're 45 and work at an IT company and still keep trying to say you're punk. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of the differentiation. I will say this, just to not bag on it so hard.
Sure.
I thought Colossus in both movies was great.
Yeah, I think, I say this every episode. With few exceptions, which I will never tell, no movie is 100% perfect or 100% terrible.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I think Colossus was actually my favorite part of Deadpool. And that's why I was like, wow, I wish that he'd been like that in all the other movies.
Totally.
I think they blew it. And then this one again, though, it's like, it's kind of strange because I really like Colossus, but the stuff that he's involved with, it just seems so like eye roll and pedestrian. Like why does Wade have to join the X-Men? Like at this point, it's like, why does Colossus even really bother?
Well, because the studio wanted to have Colossus in the movie.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess it's like you get that cute little joke about, the X-Men closing the door. Like,
yeah.
That I guess was funny enough. Like that probably got the biggest laugh out of me in the theater. I don't know. It's just, again, it all comes back to me of like, pick a lane. Do you want to be an X-Men movie? It seemed like the first one shunned. It's like, oh, you don't want us to be an X-Men? We don't want to be one.
Right.
And then this one was like, well, if you're going to let us be an X-Men, like that'd be kind of neat,
Yeah. Let me go down this road, because if we're going to do hot takes, let's do hot takes.
Let's do it.
There's a weird thing where I think there is a segment of people who like that about both movies, right? The fact that it's sort of flipping the bird to everybody who has any sort of expectation about it. It's just FUs all around. That's sort of the same problem I have with Rob Liefeld. So for any listeners who aren't the biggest comic fans. I am one. And so Rob Liefeld is ostensibly the creator of Deadpool. Here's my first problem. That is halfway true because Rob Liefeld was the artist who created Deadpool. There were 2 writers who also created Deadpool. Also, that version of Deadpool has very little resemblance to the version that showed up on screen. The version that showed up on screen was basically created by Joe Kelly, the writer, and Ed McGuinness, the artist, who did a revival of the Deadpool character in the late 90s going into the 2000s. That is what the movie drew from. That will not stop Rob Liefeld from plastering his face across anybody who will listen to his social media page, talking about how he's the creator of Deadpool, he is synonymous with Deadpool, let me get some of that Deadpool shine, right? Here's my other problem with Rob Liefeld. People keep indulging him when he does that stuff. And this goes back to the 90s, and there's a whole argument out there about like, okay, you know, people get down on Rob Liefeld for not drawing feet or not knowing how to draw human anatomy. And frankly, like, I don't have the biggest problem with that. The guy can draw however he draws. He was commercially successful. People liked his art. Here's the real problem. Rob Liefeld is a notorious rip-off artist. Rob Liefeld is a guy who has pissed off both his publishers and his employees without fail in every venture he's tried over the years. And he keeps trying to position himself as some sort of like punk king of comics. The problem is we keep letting him do that. And there are so many apologists out there for Rob Liefeld. And the question for me is like, why? Why do you indulge this guy? There's nothing redeeming about him that would necessitate you being his defender. His art objectively sucks. You can like it, but it's not great. And then as a person, he seems to be kind of a crappy guy. Like, he's enthusiastic and he certainly knows how to like do the song and dance with a crowd, but you get a little bit under the surface and there's some really bad stuff there. So here's the problem. I think if you're defending Rob Liefeld, it's just because you're a troll. It's just because you like the fact that he's an unlikable dude with very little skill who's in everybody's face despite that. And I think the same can be applied to Deadpool. I think that there's not a lot there under the surface if you want to put any thought into it, but people will embrace it because they love the troll of it. They love that this is a movie or a character or a franchise or whatever that is just there to shove middle fingers in everybody's face. And I can take that in small doses, but I just can't get behind that as any sort of ethos.
First of all, Rob, clearly you owe producer Bill some money, so please settle your debt. But I hear you, because I think this, like, the character of Deadpool to me is like the Stone Cold Steve Austin of comic books, where it's like the counterculture. But again, like, that doesn't drive the narrative forward. So in an ideal world where money was not something that corporations tried to make, I would say like Deadpool as its own would have been like, wow, what a refreshing little kick in the butt to send me off before I
small doses.
Yeah, before I get off to, you know, the 54th entry in the MCU. Like, now I'll get back to it. What a nice little palate cleanser. Instead, it becomes what it's lampooning by opening itself up into this bigger world, which is why everyone's like, I can't wait to see Deadpool in the MCU. I'm like, it's not going to work.
I couldn't agree more. And look, they'll try to make it work. Let's make no mistake.
Sure.
And Ryan Reynolds is too marketable and likable of an actor for them to not try to make it work. But if I was Kevin Feige thinking about this right now, I'd be sweating bullets because, like, not only is the tone off, which can be overcome. I mean, you know, you had the Guardians and the Avengers and whoever the hell else in Endgame and Infinity War, and it worked. The tone is off, but also, again, the ethos is off. Like, the Marvel movies, the MCU as a franchise is really, it's about something. And I think even more than the individual movies, they've built this ongoing narrative about, like, what do you do with power? And I think you see that in all their best entries. It's really it's a treatise on the Peter Parker thing. With great power comes great responsibility. And they do a really good job of finding new angles into that question. And Deadpool shirks theme so aggressively that I don't know how you make that work. I don't know how you make that simpatico.
The thing that's going to be like ironically hilarious is they will put Deadpool in the MCU.
Yes.
And he's going to the entire movie make digs at Disney, being the corporate overlord Nazi regime. All the while, it's like you realize that he is making Disney more money. Right. Like it's all, again, it just goes back to like the Deadpool 2 of like the joke is on you.
Yeah.
It's like a fake voice of the people type of thing, you know?
Totally. And what was Deadpool 2? Deadpool 2 obviously came before the Fox Disney merger, but what was Deadpool 2 doing if not literally trying to revive the entire X-Men franchise? Like that wasn't something that the first one can be forgiven because it's like, oh my God, a brand new approach to this material. Well, this opens up a whole new world to us. Again, it's the scrappy underdog that nobody saw coming. By the time you get to number 2, it's like, okay, let's just boilerplate our sequels. Let's figure out how we can jump off into a franchise. I know that they killed off, and again, this is sort of what you're saying. They killed off X-Force, and it's like, haha, that's the joke. But you know what? X-Force still walked away from the final battle in the closing shot. I mean, they had a group of 6 characters there that are ready to go for an X-Force movie. So on the one token, they're trying to get you to laugh at like, haha, look at how preposterous this whole idea of building a team franchise is. But yet at the end of the movie, they got their team franchise ready to go.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point where it's, I think why Deadpool 1 works so well also is because it's coming out of the X-Men franchise. And the X-Men franchise, I have a love-hate relationship with it, mostly hate. But one thing I will say is it was there from the beginning.
Yes.
It was there starting in 2000. It's now 2019, so almost 20 years later. It's tough to be part of a franchise that started so early that still has to adhere to kind of the themes, the tones, the aesthetics of something that was started so early in this revolution. It'd be asinine now to try to like make a movie that looked like, you know, like Tim Burton's Batman. Like we just don't make movies like that anymore. But imagine if they were still making Batmans in that same universe now, and it could it was stuck in Arrested Development. Yeah. So when Deadpool comes along and says, we know that there's kind of like an X-Men kind of manufacturing assembling line. We're not going to do that. You're like, cool. I like that. Then this one comes along, does the same thing over again, but then tries to inject a little bit of the old X-Men with like the Cable stuff and like the, you know, Morena Baccarin like dying, like the heavy stuff. Really, it's like, no, you went backwards. You went backwards. It's not funny the second time. It pisses me off that this movie exists. It pisses me off because I like the first one so much as just like a neat. These are what we can do with comic book movies. And that's why, like, I hear what you're saying about Logan, but I really like Logan, if anything, because it was not like it wasn't the first, but it came after the first Deadpool, and it really was like, okay, maybe they're taking this X-Men material and they are like, guys, we got to evolve a little bit. We haven't evolved at all. Yeah. So then to like the next one out the gate being Deadpool 2 was like, oh, never mind. Like I thought we were going in this cool path, and maybe that's my fault, just like over speculating.
Maybe. I mean, that is emblematic of studio thinking, right? Like studio thinking will seize on anything that's unexpectedly successful and make a formula out of it. And look, I get it. I've been in the business side of this business too long to not be sympathetic to that, because the reality is like the studio is just an investment bank. And so, you know what? If everybody was sleeping on the price of soybeans and suddenly soybeans were commanding a premium, everybody go and buy some soybeans, and suddenly you're opening up more soybean markets. Like that's all this is, as much as fans don't like to think of it that way. By the same token, I am a fan, and I have too much respect for storytelling and for the material to get down with that. And I think that, again, I didn't hate the first Deadpool. I just was so unimpressed by it that it upset me how well received it was. And I think that, again, just comes from a place of like, look, what do I want out of my movie-going experience? I want a story that means something told in a way that shocks and delights me.
Sure.
And there was some shock and delight in the first Deadpool. I just didn't think the story meant anything.
Well, I mean, to me, it was like, yeah, it's a very basic revenge, but I actually liked. It felt familiar. I liked the story. I felt it was delivered to me in a way that I at least hadn't seen in a long time. With Deadpool 2, the other thing that really gets under my skin is what I call the pop syndrome, which is the Prince of Persia, where you tell me at the very end everything that I just watched is completely undone, invalidated. It's like, why did I watch 2 hours of this if now she's back and none of that happened?
Yeah.
That really, really, really pisses me off.
So I was so unclear on whether we were supposed to take his jaunts through time, again, emblematic of the whole movie. Were we supposed to take that seriously?
Maybe, but here's the thing. It's like, why would you put that in there? That, like, if you are saying, okay, there's a ton of comedy, there's a ton of, farts and penises and whatever in this whole movie, but there's one emotional core, and we're not going to joke around when he goes into the afterlife and sees Vanessa. Yeah. If you then do a throwaway gag bringing her back, it's like, well, then either you've undone the emotional core of the movie I just watched, or that means the movie I just watched doesn't happen because this does count. So you have to have it one of those ways.
I totally agree with that. It would sort of, so, you brought up 22 Jump Street earlier, and there was a movie that worked with this sort of, very self-referential, satirical tone. But even in that movie, if one of those guys had died at the end of the movie, and that was sort of the grace note that we ended on, and then they did the whole credits gag about 23, 24, etc. Jump Street, I would be left going, but wait, the one guy just died. And it would be kind of funny, but it would also just take the legs out of your ending. And that's exactly what happened in Deadpool 2.
Yeah, it's tough because I always been like, okay, well, let me talk about the things I do like. I'm like, well, I think Ryan Reynolds is always charming.
Kills it.
I think he's, even when I'm not like 100% into the jokes, I still feel like he's still magnetic and energetic to watch, and I truly can't, there's a handful of roles, and it's becoming harder and harder to say that one person owns a role indefinitely. I think that's sadly why I won't get any new Indiana Jones. I still don't believe that Indiana Jones 5 is coming. They're going to say it until the end of time, and I don't think it's coming. But I feel like Ryan Reynolds will own Deadpool from now until forever. I think once he's done with it, I can't imagine it being picked up for at least a long, long, long time.
There is something interesting to be said for having a character, like right now the Joker is sort of this character that's always in reserve for if a really worthy actor wants to take a stab at comic book material. I love the fact that we might have a superhero who's just sort of in reserve for when a really great comedic actor wants to take a stab at a role. I feel like Deadpool could be that. I mean, certainly, I don't think you could recast him tomorrow, open a new Deadpool movie in 2 years, and people would dig it. They just wouldn't. But if Ryan Reynolds ages out of the movie, and then Deadpool becomes this character that sort of is handed off generationally, we're like, all right, the next, kind of manic, charming, likable comedic actor is going to come in and be the new Deadpool. I can get down with that.
The more I think about it, it's like if they had chosen one story, because I feel like they tell like 3 or 4 stories in this movie.
Yeah, they do.
Because I was just thinking, I was like, the other thing that I like about, I think the kid, Russell, Julian Dennison is the actor. I think he was pretty good.
He was good. I hated his story.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think you hated that story because there was no time to flesh it out, because it was, one story was Cable's coming back and he's going to get this kid. But then the other story was Deadpool having to team with this kid and kind of train him, which you would think that those are one and the same story, but they're really treated as 2 separate threads.
Totally divorced.
And then you also have kind of this team kind of thing with the X-Force and Zazie Beetz, and it's and trying to join the X-Men and finding his place in this new world. Any one of those 3 might have been a somewhat solid storyline, but putting all 3 of that's why I said it's so plot heavy that it's I think that Julian as Russell did a good job, but he also should have been the focal point of the movie, and he's just one of 8 things to watch.
Yeah, I don't know how they could have made that story work, if I'm being honest with you. And like, I get the story they were trying to tell was,
But again, it's not even an original story. It's Looper.
no. And so I totally feel that. I mean, the story that they're telling right now is weirdly cribbed almost exactly from Looper. But I'm saying if they wanted to pare it down, right? So you get rid of Cable as sort of the madman coming to kill the kid, which is Bruce Willis in Looper. If you get rid of Deadpool's sort of quest to, to get his mojo back, then you're just left with, okay, there's an out of control mutant that Deadpool of all frickin' people is going to have to try to mentor. And that could be funny because you could play that as sort of like a weird cracked mirror Lethal Weapon, right? Where
Right.
Deadpool is I guess Murtaugh in a weird way, and then the kid is Riggs. But still, I don't see how you get a whole movie out of that, which was maybe the problem, right? It's like, if that was a core idea, they're like, well, I don't know how we stretch that into a satisfying 2 hours, so let's layer some other stuff on top of it.
But it just was so simple the first time. It's just like,
I agree.
He wants revenge. It's like, well, then find your one sentence elevator pitch for part 2.
Well, and see, to me, I was expecting part 2, and I think this would have worked better, to be a very pure Cable Deadpool two-hander. Mm-hmm. And the movie would really be a Tango and Cash with Deadpool and Cable, and the reason that Cable comes back in time just becomes kind of stock. There's a villain that he needs to kill before that villain kills the world, and I feel like they could have some fun with that, even just again finding satirical takes on it. But that is a simple enough plot that it allows the comedy to take to take center stage, and the plot can just be there to service the comedy, which is what you're saying happened in part 1. I just feel like Cable coming back, but then that tying into this overall narrative of Deadpool going through some really heavy personal stuff, which makes him not Deadpool. The X-Men trying to mentor Deadpool trying to mentor this kid. It just, all the stories just become a melange of blandness.
So this movie is also interesting because I'm putting on my tinfoil hat here for a second.
Oh, no.
In December of that year came Once Upon a Deadpool, which they touted kind of like, oh, it's like a bunch of new stuff in Deadpool 2. It's like, okay, there's like 8 new minutes maybe.
Right.
But here's where my tinfoil hat comes in. This was before the sale of Fox to Disney had closed, but I think Disney was already pulling some strings behind the scenes. And I think they said, let's see if anyone would be interested if we tone this down a little bit, because Once Upon a Deadpool is PG-13, and they do reference the fact that it has to be edited a little bit and cut down. Basically, they put the TNT TBS version out in theaters with some new Fred Savage Princess Bride bumpers on it. So I definitely think that like Deadpool's not gonna go anywhere. Like, it didn't do gangbusters, but it certainly proved that like we can do it. Mm-hmm. That being said, like, at what point is Deadpool going to, when is like the joke, for me the joke is already tired, but when is the joke going to get tired? Or do you think that there's a chance that maybe with the right pairing of him and another character that's already established in the MCU, that maybe we could get something like the Murtaugh or, taking the piss out of something that we haven't yet done in the MCU?
Here's where I think it's tough. If you tone Deadpool down and try to fit him into the general milieu of the MCU, he basically becomes Star-Lord. He's Star-Lord with worse skin. You know what I mean? Like, the character, as presented so far, is sort of defined by his crassness and his nihilism. And so when you try to take that away, you just end up with kind of like a dopey, overeager, wannabe Han Solo-ish, but really kind of a bumbling. I mean, it really is the exact character description for Star-Lord. And so they don't necessarily ever have to meet. So maybe you've got Star-Lord in space and Deadpool on Earth, and they're serving the same function. I don't know. I think for me, I'm just so over the Deadpool joke already. It's hard for me to imagine how to make it work.
Although, there is room for another. There's a spot open for a snarky, witty guy now that RDJ is out of the franchise. But again, like, yeah, Deadpool has is Deadpool going to walk up to, I know this wouldn't happen, but like, would he walk up to Thanos and he wouldn't be like, you look really familiar. You were in my other movie, you know? Like,
See,
that would piss me off as an MCU fan.
But it's the polar opposite of RDJ in a lot of ways, because what was the Iron Man character defined by if not heart? I mean, he was snarky, he was a jerk, but the core of that character was always just his intense, extreme dedication to protecting everybody. And it bit him in the ass a bunch of times. Deadpool is the exact opposite of that. He has no mission statement. He has no real respect for anything. That doesn't mean that he's not likable, but how to shove him into a story, that's again where you lose me. It's like, I don't know how to tell a story with that character unless he's sort of a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern type guy, where he's just there to comment and take the piss and be kind of a running side gag. I don't know how you build the franchise or forward the franchise using that character.
I would say, like, oh, just give him like a limited series on Disney Plus, but there's no way they're going to put Deadpool on Disney Plus.
You know, the Deadpool thing I was most excited about was that animated series that Donald Glover was doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And they canceled that. That's never coming out.
Fell apart, and I think it was kind of not a nice breakup. It seemed like they were really upset about it.
No, and I think that got to the heart of, like, they were trying to do much more clever and kind of caustic comedy. And I think Fox as a studio was like, we're cool with dick jokes. Just
right.
Just leave it to dick jokes.
Yeah. Look, I don't begrudge anyone that loves Deadpool 2. I think, again, I think what makes Deadpool funny to me in the first one, it's all there in Deadpool 2. I guess it just wore out its welcome.
That's what I'm saying.
Quickly for me, and for you, it must have just wore out its welcome before the end of the runtime of the first one.
I think that's what we've really deduced here. I think that's exactly it.
Yeah. So again, like, maybe this is just exactly why I don't do comedies on this podcast, but I do think, again, like with Deadpool 2, I guess my whole, if I had to sum it up, it's they went too big.
Yes.
I wish that they had been handcuffed with a smaller budget. I wish they had been handcuffed with a time restraint. I wish and you never wish these things upon these big movies, because you're like, oh, if they just had more time, if they just had more money, they could have gotten this. It's like, that's they took the scrappiness out. And I think Deadpool 2 is complacent. And I think when Deadpool becomes complacent is when it becomes unnecessary. And the first Deadpool, I would argue personally, at the time was necessary, because we were heading into such deep and self-seriousness with these comic book movies that it was kind of like, guys, remember, this is all on its face kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. But then once it's complacent and it doesn't want to have the balls to make those kinds of assertions about not just other properties, but just, the whole genre in general, or anything really. This movie doesn't take a stance against anything. It just exists to exist.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And if I can yes and you, I also wish they had gone smaller with their story. I don't understand how you go from that very small, almost like 70s style revenge thriller of Deadpool 1, and then by Deadpool 2, you're doing time travel paradoxes and like a post-apocalyptic Earth, and like the story of a bullied kid. Do you want me to redo that with the siren?
No, I didn't pick it up. So just pick up whatever your thought was.
And the story of a bullied kid whose life sucks so bad that he's going to turn evil and destroy the world, which again is just like such a heavy thing. And I get it. He in the first one, he gets deformed and loses the love of his life, but there's still plenty of room for a nice, clean, happy ending. From literally minute 5, whatever it is that she dies, they don't even leave themselves room for that in Deadpool 2. And I think, again, from the standpoint of a movie that shouldn't be trying to do too much, why do you put those stakes on it? Why do you make it that big? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's the problem. Look, I qualify Deadpool as more of a comedy than an action, or more of a comedy than a comic book. Comedy sequels notorious for being very, very difficult to pull off successfully.
Don't you dare disparage The Hangover 2.
Anchorman 2, Zoolander 2. Like, it's very hard to trap lightning in a bottle twice. And in terms of box office, in terms of critical, this thing got like 70 some odd percent fresh.
That's weird to me. I feel like the critics were still riding the wave of how different it was.
Yeah, I mean, again, like when you think of some of the critics that go to these things, like they're seeing these movies, you know, very heavy, very dark, and we had, like I said, we had just come from this period where, you know, every superhero that we knew was gone and dead, and I think that's why, like, maybe they were still riding that wave of like, oh, this is still funny, it's palate cleansing,
Could still have fun with it.
Yeah, but for me, I couldn't have fun with it. And as much as some people want to blame The Last Jedi, I kind of blame Deadpool 2 for taking the wind out of Solo sales a little bit.
Oh, there's a hot take for you.
Yeah, you know, look, I still think people are going to use, you know, for whatever arguments that they have, that The Last Jedi killed Solo, and I just don't think that's true.
I agree.
I think Disney should not have put it in May. It should have gone in December when people were used to going to now Star Wars movies every Christmas. But I also think that, look, we kind of live in a bubble where it's like, if I want to go see a movie, I'm just going to go do it. Or if I want to see a movie twice, I'm just going to go do it. But there are a lot of people out there, and maybe a lot of you guys listening, and a lot of people with families that you pick your one movie a month or your one movie, you know, as 2-3 movies a summer, and that's it. We can't afford to go all the time. And at that point, I think it was like, do you want to see Solo or do you want to see Deadpool? And I think Deadpool took a lot of Solo's money. That's my personal theory. I have nothing to back it up except just my own.
I could believe that. I mean, and if I guess by that token, you could say it was sort of a 1-2 punch from Last Jedi and Deadpool. Even though, look, I love Last Jedi. My love for Last Jedi is deep and strong. So come at me with those hate emails too. That said, you know, Deadpool was so beloved off the first movie, and The Last Jedi was so polarized. If not a bad movie, was at least kind of exhausting with the whole skerfuffle that arose around it. So yeah, I get it. All right, if you're giving me a choice between Solo and Deadpool 2, I'm going to go Deadpool 2. I just refuse to believe that the majority of people who went Deadpool 2 walked out satisfied. I refuse to believe it.
I wasn't. I sat there and, you know, I was just like, maybe I'm just in it was a weird time. I had put out this video essay about how Tony Stark was the real villain of the MCU. It was slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I had my research to back it up.
I'd buy it.
I got a death threat.
Really?
Yeah. And so I went to the movies that night after I kind of reported it all. And I kind of was in a weird headspace, but I wanted to see Deadpool. I was like, this will make me laugh and get my head off it. And then, you know, I watched it and I was like, I didn't like that. And I was like, maybe I was just in a weird headspace. And then it came out on Blu-ray. I watched it again. I was like, no, I just don't like this movie at all. Yeah,
I got to say, I hadn't seen it since the theaters, but knowing that we were going to do this episode, I watched it this past weekend. And so all of my takes are fresh right now. You know, I stand by all this.
Hot, fresh takes straight from the oven. And if you want even more hot, fresh takes from myself, from producer Bill, from Ron and Ed at the Nerd G.O.A.T podcast, don't forget we are going to be at LA Comic-Con this Sunday, October 13th.
Well done.
We are going to be doing our live show. I hope I get to see you guys there. Bill, I will contractually obligated to see you there. But thank you for coming here to do this show.
Yeah, man, this was super fun. I love this show. I've been a listener since you started it, and I'm happy to contribute. I'm happy to come back and talk badly about more movies if you need me to.
Always an open invite. Thank you guys so much for listening. Do me a favor, because you're probably close to your phone, you're close to your computer, go to iTunes, rate and review, so when you type in Billy Business, the first thing that doesn't pop up is that stupid podcast about a stockbroker who doesn't even have Billy in the title. But I'm getting close, guys, because you guys have been leaving ratings and reviews. I'm moving up the ranks. It makes it easier for other people to find the show, and I love you guys. Thank you so much. And hope to see you at LA Comic-Con. But if I don't, it's okay. Still love you. I'll see you right here next week.
Hey guys, this is Ron.
And Ed.
And Billy Business.
And producer Bill.
Man, and we are super excited to finally make this more official announcement. Kind of hinted at you on a few of the episodes. This is like our official.
Wait, have you guys been hinting? Because I've been very overt. I've been like, here's what we're doing.
No, we've been basically saying what we're doing, but like...
We've been hinting around. We've been a little coy.
I've actually been like flat out saying it on my show. I don't know what you guys have been waiting for.
Billy has had no restraint whatsoever.
But what you been saying about us? We wasn't ready to go public, baby.
I'm sorry.
What have you been saying?
Sorry, Dusty Rhodes. Hey, baby. This relationship was a secret, baby.
You're telling people about the lack of... I didn't thank them.
I've been telling the people that we are joining together for the WrestleMania, baby, of all podcasts. Hot Takes with Billy Business, Nerd Go podcast. We're coming together to make a beautiful little podcast, baby.
That's right. That's what we've been doing. We basically said the same thing, and how excited we are to work with you. Maybe combine all of our fans into a giant fan base of crazy nerds.
A Voltron of fans?
Yeah, exactly. A robot that has made out of lions. That
Move on, Ron. Move on. You're losing it.
This is the kind of comedy gold you can expect.
That's right. Giving each other coming up with cool ideas. And
why did I just leave him out on Hoth like that?
I was waiting for you. I was like, I don't know, Voltron, man. This is not my
You guys were the arm lions I've ever seen. I'm goddamn over here being the head. This up, my arms aren't doing nothing.
Just floating in space. Just a big old Voltron head.
You dropped the goddamn sword.
The sword's in one of our mouths, floating into deep space.
That just shows how much confidence I have in you, Ron.
Yeah, I know.
He's going somewhere. I'm gonna follow him.
I'm pretty sure it's gonna.
Journey.
Yeah. So we're excited because we came up with an idea. We decided to call it Reboot It.
Ooh, yeah.
Batman.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So basically, it's Reboot It. We're going to, over the course of 6 episodes, reboot classic franchises.
And a lot of times it's stuff that you're like, please don't remake it. Please don't redo it. But what if you had to? And that's what we're up against. I think with Batman, we know, yes, Matt Reeves doing a Batman. But what if they came to us, they're like, guys, we need a new direction for Batman. That's what we're going to solve in the first episode.
Yeah, a whole franchise perhaps even, right?
Oh, yeah. I think more than just a movie. We're going to lay out the next 10 years for the Dark Knight on the big screen.
And this is what happens, guys. I mean, all the time in Hollywood, some producer comes into somebody's office and says, you know what we're doing? Men in Black, but totally new. Come up with a take. And then you got to do it. It doesn't matter how bad you think that idea is. You just got to do it.
Yeah. And then he does a key of cocaine right off of his long fingernail. And then goes, woo! Like Ric Flair.
Absurdly long Big Trouble in Little China fingernail. Just packed with cocaine. All the way to cuticle, baby.
I knew this was a good idea.
So basically, we're trying to do the thing that people take years to do, which is reboot these franchises, research these things. Well, we're going to do it in about an hour.
Yeah.
Live at Comic-Con.
Let's be real. That's as long as it takes to get a good idea off the ground, right? It's a solid 70 minutes.
Yeah, 70 minutes.
Spoken like a true Hollywood executive.
So we're going to be live at LA Comic-Con Sunday, October 13th. I'm super stoked. LA Comic-Con, one of my favorite events, and to get to work with you guys again because I've had so much fun being on the Tournament of Goats episode, but also just my regular Nerd Goat episode. So now I'm excited to be able to work together and live in front of an audience. I think that's going to be just so much fun.
Yeah, you guys are going to get to see this crackle of energy between the four of us. I also think it's a great way for us to kick off our Comic-Con presence because Nerd Goat has yet to have a panel. Not only are we doing our inaugural panel, but we're doing it to launch this whole new venture. We're doing it in partnership with you. It is a big event, and we want to treat it that way. We are going to give you guys a whole lot of show in our 75-minute panel, and it is going to be fun as hell.
And it's going to have interactive elements.
What?
Yes, you will be able to contribute to this ridiculous experiment that we're doing.
Oh, do go on, Ed. Do go on.
Oh, we will have specific sections as we are crafting the story in front of you. you'll be able to jump in like a choose your adventure to give us some input as to how the story should go.
We're calling those opportunities for the fan input the John Peters moment. And if you don't know what that means, John Peters is a legendary Hollywood producer for all the wrong reasons. John Peters was the man behind the ill-fated Superman Lives, and he is perhaps most famous for demanding of many different screenwriters and many different directors over the years that Superman fight a giant spider. Why? Who cares? And that's the point.
So as you step into the booth and you get a chance to shout your idea at us, maybe you want to Peters us, but maybe you want to help. Maybe you
never know.
Maybe
you want us to somehow throw in that Batman becomes a monk at some point in this Batman story, and we're just gonna have to figure out a way for Bruce to become Matches Malone and go become a friar for Act 2. I'm not sure how we're gonna have to handle this.
He's in the way of the rose.
and it's also the part that people who are putting together movies have to deal with all the time. There's different levels of producers, guys, and some producers can tell everybody what to do, and then the ones under them have to go, whoa, I guess we got to do this.
Yeah, and film rolls downhill. So you have to execute your orders.
That's a great way to put it. It does. It absolutely does. We're going to sit up there and break the story that we think will give you the Batman franchise for the ages. But if you're sitting in the audience and you're like, these better put the Phantasm in this movie or I'm leaving, you can get up and tell us to do that. And maybe then we'll just have to insert the Phantasm into this movie.
Or if you're that pushy, you can just leave.
That's true. You could also do that.
Yeah, you can get
threaten me, then you can leave. But I do like putting the Phantasm in. I'll give you that on the way out.
You can make like a Phantasm and get the out of here.
Bye-bye.
Also, go right through the wall, please.
Please attempt it several times.
But this will be the kickoff to a whole series. And like Ed said, we are doing different franchises from all of the 6 major studios. So what we're going to be doing is a 6-part limited series starting with Warner Brothers Batman. But we will move on to some other major franchises, especially the ones that you don't think anybody should ever try to reboot. We're going to tackle those first and loudest.
Absolutely. And, it's crazy how we came to that because we were like, okay, we want to do something together. And then we spent, 2 hours yelling at each other, coming up with ideas, and none of them were good.
And then Ron's just sitting there like, I don't know. What if we just did reboots? 2 hours later, it's like, man, you buried the lead. Why didn't you start with that?
This is the greatest idea. Because,
of course, it came from the normal Ron Swallow tragedy idea.
Yeah, it was like, guys, what if we just talk about movies that make us sad for an hour?
Yeah.
That's where it started.
That's where it started. And then I was thinking about if you had to try to make a movie about where one of the actors had died in it. You know what I mean? Because I'm so up because I'm like a nightmare person in my brain. And then Billy Business and Billy and Ed, as always, were like, hey, Ron, how about we take the tragedy out of that great idea?
You're out of 10. Take it down to a 6.
And then we'll make it a good idea.
So we put it through the D tragedy filter, and we got something great where I think it uses all of our skills. Billy and Bill, you guys are producer types. Me and Ron, we're just minimum wage kids with a dream, man. And we're all getting to contribute to making this movie live.
And the thing that I love is it's truly combining both of our podcasts because we are talking about the greatest franchises, the greatest intellectual properties of all time. And we're going to have some hot takes on it because especially if you throw in the John Peters rule, there's no way to get around having some really unpopular opinions to get the job done.
Dude, and then that's part of the perfect storm of our podcast, though, because me and Ron, we love to talk about, the greatest of all time and have everybody justify that. You come at it with okay, you dislike this movie. Why so serious about how much
That's
this sucks?
Exactly what I just said, Ed. Thank you for repeating exactly my point.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I do. I'm 2 seconds into the past. That's my power.
You are the reiterator.
Guys, I just saw the past.
Dude, I am the reiterator. I'll be back.
Yeah.
Your point will be back.
I've been here the whole time.
Hold on, let me leave. I'm back.
Actually, scrap this whole reboot. I think we need to focus on the reiterator.
You will be recycled. You are fertilizer.
Which is another way to say reiterator.
Guys,
I don't want to be repetitive here.
I'm not the reiterator. I'm the recycler. Go.
That's synonym crunch.
I really hope that someone throws the reiterator at us as the John Peters rule.
Oh,
He's got to be the villain.
Then we'll know they're true fans. That's what we want.
Come with your reiterator t-shirt. Like, you already said that.
If somebody shows up in a reiterator t-shirt, we're going to bring you up to join the panel.
That
That's
is 100% true.
Oh, dude, yeah, that'll be the ultimate Peters.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
unless you suck, and then we're not.
then we'll kick you out.
I'm excited though because the first one is live. I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah.
But the party doesn't end because, like you said, there's still a handful more episodes, and it's not just a hot takes feed, and it's not just the Nerd G.O.A.T feed. We're making something new. This is like the World Series. This is like game 1 of the 7 games of the World Series, and it's going to be going on until we get every single studio.
Absolutely. I was thinking if we need to release some bonus content, we could always move on from the major studios and do like a Netflix or an Apple thing. You know,
I can't wait for the A24 episode.
Oh,
for sure.
Reboot the witch, baby. Maybe that Lighthouse movie.
Let's get that Annapurna hot takes.
Well, we would definitely like to see you out at this panel. Again, LA Comic-Con is at the Los Angeles Convention Center from October 11th through the 13th. You can cap off your Comic-Con experience watching Reboot It live with Nerd G.O.A.T and Billy Business. We're at 2:30 on Sunday. Come on out, join us, be a part of the panel, bring your Reiterator t-shirts and your bad ideas. We will indulge it all and have a great time doing it.
That was
nice.
The Reiterator is f***ing gold. Just like repeating exactly what I just said like it's a new thought.
I was trying to think of something to say, but then you said it, and I was like, I already got this loaded. So I was gonna try to maybe massage it, and then it was like, you're like, no, you didn't massage it. It's the same
The
thing.
Reiterator
And then it's
is
so funny.
the greatest character.
How about we do what you just said?
Your thought you just said would be back.
That shit was fucking hilarious.